I still remember that night like it happened yesterday. The sound of breaking glass, a scream, and then silence. It came from next door, the Hendersons' house. They'd always been quiet, polite. The kind of neighbors you wave to but never really know. But that night, something inside those walls broke. And I don't mean just a window. You see, when you live alone as long as I have, you start noticing the smallest things. The flicker of a light at 2 a.m., the shadow moving behind a curtain, the tone in someone's voice when they think no one's listening. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I swear I wasn't. It's just, this street is too quiet. The walls too thin. And the night air carries secrets. It started 3 weeks ago. I just made myself some tea, chamomile, my only comfort these days, when I heard them. First it was just murmuring. Then the murmuring turned sharp. Money, I heard. That word cuts deeper when said with anger. Then a man's voice, Daniel, the husband, low and rough. You spent it, didn't you? Don't lie to me, Claire. And her voice trembling but trying to stay calm. It wasn't what you think. I needed to. Then something hit the wall. A thud. Then the baby cried. That's when I realized. I'd never seen a baby before. I thought the Hendersons didn't have children. But the crying was so real, so small and panicked. I froze with my teacup halfway to my lips, my heart pounding in my throat. It went on for maybe a minute. Then silence again. No footsteps. No comfort. Just silence. The next morning their curtains were drawn. The mailbox overflowed with letters. And Daniel left early, in his old gray truck. He didn't wave. Claire didn't step outside all day. But that night I saw lights flickering in their living room, the kind that come from a TV playing with no sound. And a shadow sitting still on the couch. By the third day, I started keeping a small notebook. I don't know why. Maybe it made me feel less intrusive, like I was documenting, not spying. March 12th. Daniel left at 7:23 a.m. March 13th, shouting again, something about a missing account. March 14th. A man in a brown jacket came by. Stayed 12 minutes. Left with a folder. March 15th. Claire cried outside, sitting on the porch steps. I wanted to go out there. I almost did. But I stopped myself. Because what would I say? Hi, I couldn't help but notice your life is falling apart. Need some sugar? No. People like them don't want witnesses. On the 5th night, I saw something that still makes my stomach twist. It was around midnight. I couldn't sleep. My knees ache when it rains. I went to the window and saw Daniel standing in their backyard. He had a shovel. And there was a large black bag at his feet. For a moment I thought it might be trash. Maybe garden waste. But it was too heavy. He looked around like someone afraid of being seen. Then he dug. Slowly. Carefully. And when he finished, he stood there, breathing hard, wiping his face with his sleeve. He didn't go back inside right away. He just stared at the ground. Then he whispered something I couldn't hear. And that's when I realized Claire wasn't in the house. I didn't see her all the next day. Her car was still in the driveway. Her phone, I later noticed, kept lighting up through the curtains. But no one answered. No one moved inside that house until late that evening, when Daniel finally came home again. His clothes still dirty from the night before. He looked hollow. Not guilty. Not even angry. Just empty. I tried to tell myself I was imagining things. That maybe she went to visit family. But when the mailman came by, he hesitated too. He asked me, Mrs. Turner, do you know if the Hendersons moved? I said no. He frowned. Then left without delivering anything. 2 days later, I heard the front door open. I rushed to the window. It wasn't Daniel. It was Claire. Her hair was tangled and she looked thinner. She walked like someone exhausted, dragging her feet. She didn't look toward my house. She didn't look anywhere. Just went inside, shut the door, and turned the lock. I felt relief, but it didn't last. That night, the fighting came back. Louder than before. There was a crash, a scream, and the baby again, that same desperate cry. But then another sound joined in. A man's voice. Not Daniel's. Someone deeper, older. You should have told me, he said. I didn't have a choice. Claire sobbed. He would have. Then I heard a slap. I covered my mouth, my whole body trembling. And then that silence again. I wanted to call someone. The police, maybe. But what would I say? I heard noises. A cry that might be a baby. They think I was senile. So I stayed quiet, and I hated myself for it. The next morning, a silver car was parked outside their house. A man in a suit went inside and didn't come out for hours. When he finally did, he looked shaken. He made a phone call on the porch, speaking fast and low. Then he left. After that, the Hendersons' house stayed dark for 2 whole days. No lights, no sounds, not even the baby. By the time Sunday came, I couldn't take it anymore. I went to their mailbox and pretended to check mine. There was a faint smell like something rotten but not food, something metallic. It made me dizzy. I went back inside and shut all the windows. That night, I sat by my kitchen table staring at the phone. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped it. I dialed 911. Then I hung up. As what if I was wrong? What if it was just nothing? But deep down I knew. The following morning something strange happened. A woman I'd never seen before came to their door. She was young, maybe in her 20s, with a little boy holding her hand. They stood there for a long time. When Daniel opened the door, he froze. The boy hid behind her leg. And then Claire appeared, her face pale, her hands trembling. The woman said something I couldn't hear, and handed Claire a small envelope. Claire looked inside, gasped, and covered her mouth. Daniel grabbed the envelope from her, tore it, and threw it on the porch. The woman shouted something, sharp, angry, then took the boy and left. I could see the paper fluttering in the wind. A photograph slipped out. I couldn't see it clearly, but I swear, it looked like a baby. After that day, the Hendersons didn't leave the house. Not once. At night, their lights stayed on till dawn. Sometimes I'd hear the faint sound of Claire's voice, crying, whispering, begging. And Daniel. Sometimes he just paced back and forth in the yard, talking to himself, like a man haunted by something he couldn't undo. I told myself I'd stop watching, that it wasn't my business. But every time I looked away, my heart started pounding, like my body already knew something terrible was coming. And it did. 3 nights later, I woke to sirens. Flashing red and blue filled my living room. Ambulance lights. I rushed to the window, my knees barely holding me. Their front door was open. Police. Paramedics. And Daniel sitting on the steps, his head in his hands. His shirt was covered in something dark. One of the officers went inside carrying a small blanket. A baby's blanket. I wanted to scream, to ask what happened, but I just stood there gripping the curtain, watching as they carried Claire out on a stretcher. Her face was pale. Her eyes closed. The baby's blanket fell from the medic's arm and landed in the grass. And Daniel, he didn't move. Not even when they took her away. I couldn't sleep after that. The lights stayed flashing outside for hours. When they finally left, the street went back to being quiet. Too quiet. And from that moment, everything changed in me. Because I realized I didn't just overhear a fight about money. I'd witnessed something dying in that house long before the police came. Something no one could fix. And I was the only one who saw it happen. The morning after the sirens, the street felt hollow. You know that strange quiet after something terrible happens? When even the birds seem afraid to sing. That's how it was. Like the world itself was holding its breath. I stood by my window with a blanket over my shoulders, staring at their empty driveway. The police tape fluttered like a yellow snake in the wind. A lone officer sat in his car, writing something down. Then he drove away, leaving the tape behind. A warning, or maybe a confession no one wanted to make. For the first time in years, I felt afraid to look outside. But I couldn't help it. That house, it pulled at me, like it was asking to be seen. Later that day, I saw a woman in uniform, maybe a social worker, walking up to the porch. She hesitated before stepping over the tape, then went inside. 15 minutes later, she came out carrying a small box. She held it so gently like it was something fragile. Then she placed it in the trunk of her car and drove away. That box haunted me. It was too small for clothes, too light for papers. And I couldn't stop wondering what was inside. For days after, no one came or went. Just silence. The curtains remained drawn, the yard untouched. Until one evening Daniel returned. He parked his truck at the curb and sat there for a long time, not moving. When he finally got out, he didn't go straight inside. He just stood in front of the door, his hand trembling on the doorknob. Then slowly he opened it and disappeared inside. A few minutes later, I saw a light in the kitchen, then another in the hallway. And then the sound of a baby's mobile. The soft, tinny melody drifted through the air. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. I froze, because I knew that song. I'd heard it nights before, when the baby was crying. But there hadn't been a baby in that house since the ambulance left. I wanted to tell myself it was my mind playing tricks, that maybe the police had returned something. But when I looked closer, the melody stopped abruptly, and the light in the kitchen went out. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel standing in the yard again, the shovel, the bag, the whisper, and that sound, the soft, eerie lullaby echoing from an empty house. The next morning, I noticed something new. A small white envelope tucked under my front door. No name, no return address, just a single word, written in shaky handwriting. Please. Inside was a photograph. It was faded, slightly torn at the edges. A woman holding a baby in her arms. Claire. And the baby looked different from what I'd imagined. Its eyes so bright, so wide, but something in them felt off, like it wasn't really there. I sat down hard, clutching the photo to my chest. Why would someone send this to me? How did they even know where I lived? Though of course they knew. I was right next door. But the word please what? That night I saw Daniel again. He stood at the window looking straight ahead, but his eyes, they didn't look at anything. Just blank. He held something small in his hand. I couldn't see what it was. Then he lifted it to his lips, whispered something, and placed it on the windowsill. It caught the light for a second. A pacifier. After that, he turned off the lights. I started hearing noises again a few nights later, footsteps, slow and uneven. Sometimes a soft knock from inside their walls. I told myself it was the pipes, the house settling. But every night, around the same time, I'd hear the same faint sound. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. One night I couldn't take it anymore. I went outside. The air was cold, sharp enough to bite my skin. I crossed the lawn and stopped at their porch. The yellow tape was still there, brittle from the wind. But I lifted it and stepped closer. The front door wasn't locked, just slightly open. Pushed it slowly. The smell hit me first, dust, dampness, and something else. Something metallic again. I called out, "Hello." No answer. But then a noise from upstairs. Soft, rhythmic, like a cradle moving. My hands shook as I gripped the banister. Every step creaked under my weight. I felt foolish, terrified, but also drawn in. I reached the top and the sound stopped. The door to the nursery, I didn't even know they had one, was half open. Inside, pale moonlight spilled across the floor. A crib stood in the corner. Empty. But the mobile above it was spinning slowly, even though there was no wind. And beside it, on the floor, lay another photograph. This one was newer. Daniel and Claire smiling. But behind them, barely visible, was that same woman who'd come with the little boy. Only now she was standing in the background, her face blurred, almost erased by the flash. I stepped back, my breathing loud in my ears. Then I heard a whisper. Came from behind me. A man's voice. Who's there? It was Daniel. I turned startled, nearly losing my balance. He looked terrible. His eyes red, his face pale, hands shaking. "What are you doing here?" he asked. I couldn't answer. He looked past me into the nursery and his face changed. Softened. He walked in slowly, knelt beside the crib and touched the mobile. "She liked that song," he said quietly. "Wouldn't sleep without it." Then he turned to me. She wasn't supposed to be here that night. Neither of them were. I wanted to ask who he meant, but I couldn't speak. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to me. "Maybe this will explain," he said. Then he stood, walked past me, and went downstairs. I heard the front door close. When I unfolded the paper, I saw numbers. A bank statement. Withdrawals, transfers, large amounts of money, all under Claire's name. But next to the final transaction, someone had written a note in blue ink. For adoption, confidential. I sat down right there on the floor. Adoption. The baby wasn't theirs. Or maybe it was supposed to be, but something went wrong. I stayed until morning light crept through the curtains. When I finally stood up, my knees were stiff and cold. The crib was still empty. But on the windowsill, the pacifier gleamed in the sunlight. When I went downstairs, Daniel was gone. The door wide open. Outside, tire tracks cut deep into the wet ground. And on the porch lay another small envelope. This time there was no word written on it, just a single key inside. I didn't tell anyone. Not the police, not the neighbors, not even the mailman who asked if I'd seen Daniel lately. Because something in me knew this wasn't just about money. It wasn't even about guilt. It was about something lost. Something no amount of money could ever buy back. That night, I sat in my chair by the window again. The house next door was dark, still lifeless. But as the wind picked up, I heard it again, the faint sound of the mobile turning, the melody barely audible over the wind, and then a baby's cry. Soft, short, like it came from far, far away. I closed the curtains, pressed my palms together and whispered, "Please, let them rest." But deep down I knew they wouldn't. Not yet. Not until I used that key. That key wouldn't leave my mind. I placed it on my kitchen table, next to my cup of cold tea, and just stared at it. It was small, old-fashioned, with scratches along the edge. It looked like the kind of key that didn't belong to a door, but to something hidden. Something meant to stay locked. For 3 nights I didn't touch it. But I couldn't stop hearing things. Not voices this time, just sounds. A soft thump from next door, like someone walking barefoot on wood. Sometimes a creak, a faint rattle. And once a whisper. Said my name. Or maybe I wanted it to. On the 4th night, the rain came back. I always hated rain. It brings back memories I try to forget. My husband used to love storms. He'd open the window and say, "Listen, Helen, the world's washing itself clean." But nothing ever really washes clean, does it? It just hides under layers of dirt, waiting. That night I took the key. I wrapped myself in my shawl, put on my old slippers and stepped outside. The street was empty. The rain made the pavement shine like glass. The Hendersons' house looked darker than ever. The kind of dark that swallows the light around it. But I went anyway. The door opened with a soft click. It shouldn't have. I hadn't even turned the knob all the way. The air inside was heavy, damp, filled with the smell of something sweet and rotten. I called out softly, "Daniel." My voice sounded strange, too small for the silence that followed. I walked through the living room. Dust had started to settle on the furniture, like the house was already trying to forget its owners. The clock on the wall had stopped, 3:11, the same time I'd heard the sirens that night. I don't know why, but I felt drawn to the basement door. It was at the end of the hallway behind the kitchen. The handle was cold, wet from condensation. And there, right above the keyhole, a faint mark, like something had been scratched away. The key slid in perfectly. And when I turned it, a soft metallic click echoed down the stairs. The smell grew stronger as I opened the door. Not decay exactly, but something stale, like old air trapped for too long. I hesitated at the top step, holding the railing tight. Each creak of wood sounded like it might break beneath me. But I kept going, because at this point, I needed to know. At the bottom, I found a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling, its cord swaying. When I pulled it, the light flickered once, twice, then held. And what I saw made me grip the railing so hard my knuckles turned white. There was a crib, down there in the basement, covered in a thin film of dust. Beside it, boxes, some open, some taped shut, marked with numbers and dates. I stepped closer. Inside one box were photographs, dozens of them. Women, men, children, all smiling, all holding babies that looked eerily similar. Same round cheeks, same small hands, same blank eyes. And then I saw the folders, each one labeled with a name. The first said, Claire Henderson. The next, Daniel Henderson. The third, Subject 3. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were papers, medical forms, receipts, and an ultrasound image. On the back, a note written in Daniel's handwriting. Test failed. Termination required. I couldn't breathe. I stepped back, knocking over a small box. Something metallic rolled out and clattered across the floor. A bracelet, engraved with the name Mia, the baby's name, the one I'd heard crying through my walls. I felt sick. It all started to make sense. The money, the strangers, the envelope marked adoption. It wasn't adoption. It was something else. Something they were part of, maybe even victims of. I looked around again. One of the boxes was sealed tighter than the rest. The tape yellowed with age, the edges brittle. I crouched, pulled it toward me, and tore it open. Inside was fabric. A baby blanket, the same one I'd seen that night in the paramedics' arms. And underneath it, I wish I could forget, there were small jars, rows of them labeled with dates. Inside each one, something pale floated in cloudy liquid. Tiny, fragile. I dropped the blanket and stumbled backward, hitting the wall. My body wouldn't stop shaking. I turned off the light and ran up the stairs as fast as I could. But halfway up, I heard something behind me. A soft cooing, like a baby trying to speak. When I looked back, the light was flickering again. And the mobile, yes, the mobile, it was hanging from the ceiling beam, spinning slowly, though there was no wind. I slammed the door shut, locked it, ran home. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The next morning, everything felt unreal. The rain had stopped. The street looked normal. People walking their dogs, a child on a bicycle. No one knew what was under that house. No one except me. But I couldn't go to the police. They think I was mad. An old woman wandering into other people's basements, telling stories about jars and mobiles. No one would believe me. They never do. So I tried to forget. I cleaned my house. I made tea. I fed the birds. But even then, the smell wouldn't leave my hands. That sweet metallic smell. A few nights later, I saw movement again. The lights in the Hendersons' house flickered. Just once, but I swear I saw it. Someone was there. Or something. Then a shadow passed by the upstairs window. Slowly, gracefully, like someone holding a baby. I pressed my hand to the glass and whispered, "Claire." The shadow stopped. And for a second, I swear on my life, I heard the faint sound of a baby giggling. But it wasn't joyful. It was hollow. The next morning, a van arrived. Plain white, no markings. 2 men stepped out wearing dark clothes. They entered the house without knocking. They didn't stay long. When they left, they carried a single crate, large, heavy, and loaded it into the van. No one saw. No one asked. After they drove away, the house fell silent again. Completely. No lights. No sound. Just emptiness. I thought it was over. That whatever I'd seen, whatever that house had swallowed, was finally gone. But then last night, someone knocked on my door. It was soft. 3 knocks. Slow. I hesitated, my heart pounding. When I opened it, there was no one there. Only a small bundle on the porch, wrapped in that same baby blanket. It was damp from the rain, but warm inside. I unwrapped it carefully, and what I found wasn't a baby. It was the bracelet, the one with Mia on it. Still warm, as if someone had been holding it moments before. I brought it inside, placed it on my table next to the key. And as I sat there, I realized something I hadn't before. The smell. It wasn't coming from next door anymore. It was here, in my house. I didn't tell anyone about the bracelet. Not the police. Not my sister when she called that morning. She asked if I'd been sleeping, if I was taking my pills. I lied. Said yes to everything. Because how do you tell someone that a baby's bracelet appeared on your porch in the middle of the night? And that it was still warm? I left it on the table next to the key. Every time I walked past, I felt my stomach twist. It was like they were both watching me. Those small, cold pieces of metal carrying more truth than anyone dared to say aloud. I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence. Maybe the police had been around and dropped it off. Maybe a neighbor found it in the yard. But then again, why leave it in the middle of the night? Why not knock? I kept the curtains closed that day. Even so, I could feel the other house staring back at me. Sounds ridiculous, but I could. Every creak, every shift in the wind made me think of that basement, of what I'd seen, of those jars. I spent the next 3 days in silence. Didn't answer the phone. Didn't check the mail. I just sat by the window watching a place I swore I'd never look at again. And then, on the 4th morning, someone came. A woman, not young, not old. Maybe 40. Short hair, a dark coat, eyes that didn't blink enough. She parked a black car across the street and stood there for a long time, looking at the Hendersons' house. Then she looked at mine. I froze. Her eyes met mine through the curtain, and I could tell she knew I'd been watching. She smiled, small, polite, then walked to the Hendersons' porch and unlocked the door. No hesitation, like she'd been there before. She stayed inside for almost an hour. When she came out, she was holding a single cardboard box. She didn't look around, didn't wave, just got in her car and drove away. I couldn't see what was inside the box. But I knew that after she left, something in that house had changed. It wasn't just empty anymore. It felt erased. That night, I found a note slipped under my door. Typed, not handwritten. Short. Cold. Do not speak to anyone about what you saw. No name. No signature. Just those words. I sat in my chair for hours staring at it. First, I thought about calling the police. But then I imagined the questions, the disbelief in their eyes, the way they'd look at my shaking hands and think she's confused. And I realized I was alone with it now. The next morning, I decided to go out, just to the store, to remind myself the world still existed. It felt strange to be surrounded by people, by noise, by sunlight. But even there, I caught myself checking reflections in the glass doors, looking for that black car. When I came home, there was another envelope. No note this time, only a small photograph inside. Me, standing at my window. The picture was taken from across the street, from the same angle where that woman had parked her car. The timestamp in the corner read, 2 days ago, 11:47 p.m. I dropped it. My whole body went cold. They'd been watching me. The watcher had become the watched. I locked every door, every window, turned off the lights. But it didn't make me feel safer. It just made the silence louder. That night, I sat in the dark listening. Nothing. No trucks, no sirens, no crickets. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator. And then at exactly midnight, a car door closed outside. I peeked through the curtain. The black car again. This time there were 2 people inside. They didn't get out. They just sat there, headlights off, engine running. I watched for almost half an hour. Then they drove away, slow, deliberate, as if to remind me they could come back anytime. After that night, I stopped sleeping. The days blurred together, tea, window, notebook, silence. I kept notes again, the way I used to when the Hendersons were alive. Only now the entries looked different. April 4th, car parked again. 2:15 a.m. stayed 6 minutes. April 6th, noise in basement, mine. Could be pipes. April 7th, heard someone say she knows. Outside near mailbox. I stopped opening my mail. I couldn't. And then something happened I can't explain, not because it was supernatural, but because it felt too real. Too human. Someone had been inside my house. I noticed it on the morning of April 9th. The key and bracelet were gone from the table. At first, I thought I'd misplaced them, but I never moved things. Not anymore. I checked every drawer, every corner, even the floor under the table. Nothing. But when I opened the kitchen cabinet to get my tea, there they were. The key and the bracelet, neatly placed on the shelf between the sugar and the cups. As if someone wanted me to know they'd been here, and that they could come back. That day I packed a small bag. Some clothes, my pills, my notebook. I was ready to leave, go stay with my sister, far from here. But when I reached the door, I froze. Because taped to the glass was a new photograph. Another one of me, this time sleeping in my chair, taken from inside my house. My knees gave out. I dropped the bag. I couldn't even scream. It took me an hour to stand again. When I finally did, I locked the door and went to the window. Across the street, the Hendersons' house stood quiet, too quiet. But I could see light seeping through a crack in the basement window. Faint, pulsing like a heartbeat. I knew then what I had to do. That night, I took a flashlight and crossed the street one last time. The air smelled like rain again. The door was still unlocked, of course it was. Inside, everything was the same. Dust, cold air, silence. But when I reached the basement door, the smell was gone. Replaced by something else, bleach. Strong. Overpowering. Someone had cleaned everything. The boxes were gone. The crib, the jars, the photos, all gone. Only one thing remained on the floor. A single sheet of paper. It was from a medical report. Half burned, edges curled and blackened. I picked it up, careful not to tear it. There was a logo at the top. Horizon Research Institute. And beneath it, a single line of text. Project suspended due to ethical breach. All subjects relocated. That's when I heard a sound behind me. A floorboard shifting upstairs. I turned off the flashlight. Listened. Nothing for a few seconds. Then footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. I pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering in my chest. The steps moved toward the stairs, then stopped. Someone was there, standing just above me. After what felt like forever, the front door opened, then closed. The steps faded. When I finally dared to go back up, the house was empty again. But the light outside my window was gone. No street lamps, no cars. Just darkness. I locked the basement door behind me and ran home. As soon as I got inside, I tore the medical paper into pieces and threw it in the fire. I watched it burn until there was nothing left but ash. But I couldn't stop shaking. Because if the subjects had been relocated, where were they now? After that night, I didn't sleep for 2 days. Every sound made me jump. The refrigerator hummed, the pipes sighing. I couldn't tell anymore what was real and what was my heart echoing in my ears. I kept thinking about that paper. Project suspended due to ethical breach. Words that felt like they didn't belong in any ordinary neighborhood. I wanted to forget it, but I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the word relocated. It rolled around in my head like a loose screw. Relocated to where? By the third morning, I made myself sit down at the kitchen table and do what I always do when things stop making sense. I started writing. Names, dates, fragments. The first day I saw the moving truck. The day I heard the first fight. The night the crying stopped. And then that line from the report, Horizon Research Institute. I'd never heard of it. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I turned on my old desktop computer. It took forever to start, humming like an old cat trying to remember how to purr. When it finally lit up, I typed those words. Nothing ordinary came up. No public website. No phone number. Only an archived article from a local paper, 10 years old, half scanned. It said the institute had been shut down after an incident involving private medical trials. No details. Just a list of former partners. And my breath stopped when I saw one of the names. Richard D. Leland. My husband. I thought it had to be a coincidence. But then I saw the date beside his name, 1996. That was the year he stopped talking about work. The year he started locking his study at night. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely scroll. The article said the institute had focused on memory retention experiments in early development. Babies. My throat tightened. I sat there for a long time listening to the clock tick. Could Richard have known the Hendersons? No, that didn't make sense. He died 5 years before they moved in. But maybe they worked for the same people. Maybe the same money was still moving under different names. The next morning, I walked down to the post office. I hadn't left the house in a week, but I needed to breathe somewhere that didn't smell like fear. When I got there, the clerk, a quiet man named Henry, gave me my stack of mail. Bills, catalogs, the usual. But one envelope stood out. Thick, heavy, no return address. I opened it right there on the counter. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed again. Stop digging, Mrs. Leland. You don't understand what you're part of. I froze. Henry asked if everything was okay. I told him it was just a scam letter. But my voice shook. When I got home, I tore the letter to pieces, flushed it down the toilet. But that night, when I checked my window, the black car was back. Lights off. Engine running. And someone was standing outside it this time, watching my house. Not moving. Not even smoking. Just standing there. I didn't call the police. I knew what they'd say. We'll send a patrol car. They'd drive by once, see nothing, and forget about it. So instead, I did something foolish. I turned the porch light on. Bright yellow, steady. The figure didn't flinch. Didn't move an inch. But after maybe a minute, the car pulled away, slow as before. And for the first time, I saw the license plate. HCN04. Sin. Horizon. The next morning, I found muddy footprints on my porch. Smaller than a man's. And next to them, a handprint smudged low on the door, as if someone had leaned there to listen. I wanted to believe it was a delivery worker, but deep down I knew better. That day, I went into my late husband's study. The key was still hanging on the same hook where it had always been. I hadn't entered that room in years. It smelled like dust and old books. Everything was still in place. The oak desk, the leather chair, the locked drawer I never opened. It took me 3 tries to find the right key. When I finally did, I found files inside, folders yellowed with age, brittle paper. Most of them were technical reports. Graphs, signatures, clinical notes. And there it was again, the same logo. Horizon Research Institute. One document had a handwritten note from Richard. Subject responses inconsistent. Further testing approved under Henderson directive. My blood went cold. Henderson Directive. Could it be the same Hendersons? Or someone else with the same name? I flipped through the pages, more numbers, dates, initials. And then a line that made me drop the folder. Specimen transferred to residential site. Observation required. Residential site. Observation. That's what I'd been doing all along without knowing. Watching the same experiment continue right across from me. The rest of the week passed in fragments. I hardly ate. I'd wake up and find my curtains open when I was sure I'd closed them. Once I found my notebook lying open on the counter. A page torn out. Whoever was watching me was inside again. I tried to convince myself I was just old, confused, mixing things up. But then one night I heard a voice outside my window. A woman's voice. Calm. Cold. You should have stayed out of it, Ruth. She said my name. I didn't look. I just sat there, frozen in the dark, heart thudding so hard I thought it would give out. After a while, the silence returned. But that voice stayed inside me, echoing every time the house creaked. The next morning, I decided I'd had enough. I called the number of the police officer who'd investigated the accident. Detective Marsh. He answered right away, polite but tired. I told him everything, the bracelet, the car, the notes, even the photograph of me sleeping. He listened. When I finished, he sighed. Mrs. Leland, there's something you should know. The Hendersons didn't just live across the street. The house was in your husband's name. My mind went blank. That's impossible, I said. He's been dead for years. I know, he said. But the paperwork traces back decades. Transfers, shell companies. Someone kept it under your husband's file. We can't figure out why. After I hung up, I sat at the window until the sun went down. The Hendersons' house was still empty, but it didn't feel abandoned. Felt staged. Like everything that happened there was meant for me to see. And now that I had, they didn't need to hide anymore. That night, I wrote one sentence in my notebook. They're cleaning the past, and I'm part of what they missed. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. I was angry, because all this time I'd blamed myself for watching. But maybe watching was exactly what I was supposed to do. Maybe that's why they kept me alive. So I made a decision. I was going to finish what Richard started. Find out what Horizon really did. And why the Hendersons ended up dead in a house that was never truly theirs. I didn't care how dangerous it was. If they wanted me silent, they'd have to come and make me. I pulled the curtains shut, locked every door, and sat at the table with my notebook and a flashlight. I started mapping it all out, the dates, the names, the connections, and somewhere between midnight and dawn, I realized something else. Every time I wrote the word Horizon, the ink bled a little on the paper, like the pen itself hesitated, like the story didn't want to be told. But I kept writing anyway, because it was my story now too. And I wasn't done. Not yet. Strange, the things you start to notice when you decide to stop being afraid. The sound of your own heartbeat. The weight of silence between passing cars. The way your hands tremble. Not from fear anymore, but from purpose. I hadn't felt that in years. That morning I made coffee. Real coffee, not the instant kind I'd been surviving on. The smell reminded me of when Richard used to leave early for work, back when I believed he was building something good, something clean. Now the scent made me nauseous. I spent the whole morning going through his papers again. Every folder. Every line. Most of it was numbers, medical terminology, things I barely understood. But in one of the old notebooks, I found something that didn't fit. A name written several times in his handwriting. Dr. Charles Monroe. And next to it, a note. Contact, oversight, risk of exposure. I searched the name online. Only one result came up. A retired researcher living 2 towns over, age 87. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I grabbed my coat, my notebook, and the photo of the Hendersons' house. If anyone knew what this was all about, it would be him. The bus ride took almost an hour. Every bump in the road rattled through my bones. I almost turned back twice, but then I pictured that note. Stop digging, Mrs. Leland. And I tightened my grip on the seat. Dr. Monroe lived in a small white house at the end of a quiet street. When he opened the door, I could tell right away he knew who I was. He didn't smile. He just looked tired. Mrs. Leland, he said softly, you shouldn't be here. I told him I wasn't leaving until he told me what my husband had done. First he said nothing. Then with a heavy sigh, he stepped aside and let me in. His house was full of dust and old books, the kind that smell like time itself. We sat at the kitchen table. He didn't offer coffee. Instead, he poured 2 glasses of water and stared at the wall as if looking back decades. Richard was a good man, he began. But he was naive. We all were. I didn't interrupt. The Horizon Institute wasn't supposed to be sinister. It started as a private research group, developmental neuroscience, memory encoding in infants. The idea was to help with learning disorders, trauma, cognitive delay. He rubbed his temples. But someone realized there was money in it, defense contracts, pharmaceutical ties. Soon it wasn't about helping anymore. It was about control. My throat felt tight. What kind of control? Early conditioning. Training memory response in newborns. Testing how much a brain could remember before it even learned to speak. He hesitated. They called it the retention program. The room felt smaller. And the Hendersons? I asked. How did they fit in? He didn't answer immediately. When he finally did, his voice broke a little. Your husband designed the observation protocol. The Hendersons were one of the test families. After the program shut down, they were compensated, given new identities, new homes. Your husband arranged the property transfer himself. He thought it would protect them. Protect them from what? From the people who wanted to erase the past. I stared at the glass of water in front of me. For a moment I felt dizzy, like the floor had shifted under me. You mean to tell me, I whispered, that baby wasn't theirs? Dr. Monroe closed his eyes. They raised him, yes. But he was born in the program. Artificial insemination, controlled genetics. No official birth record. Just a subject number. I covered my mouth. I could barely breathe. He looked at me then, his eyes full of guilt. When the institute closed, the data was supposed to be destroyed. But someone kept copies. Your husband, I think. Maybe because he couldn't live with what we'd done. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. What about the fights? I heard them yelling about money, about something missing. Dr. Monroe interrupted quietly. They weren't fighting about money. They were arguing about documents. The Hendersons wanted to go public. Your husband's research notes were hidden in that house, in the basement. That's what someone was after. I felt my heart pound in my chest. So when they died? He looked down at his hands. It wasn't an accident, Mrs. Leland. The words hung in the air like poison. He didn't have to say more. I could see the rest in his face, the exhaustion, the regret. He'd carried this for decades, and now so would I. When I stood to leave, he stopped me at the door. There's one more thing you should know, he said. Your husband tried to shut them down from the inside. The people at Horizon, they threatened him. That's why he started locking his study. He wasn't hiding from you. He was hiding you from them. I didn't cry until I got back home. And when I did, I cried harder than I had the day he died. Because all those years I thought he'd grown distant, secretive, cold. He was trying to protect me. And I never even thanked him. The house felt heavier when I walked in. The air thick, charged. I checked the windows, still locked. But something was different. A smell. Faint but familiar. Bleach. My heart stopped. I turned on the light. The living room looked untouched, at first. Then I saw it. The notebook. The one I'd been writing in for weeks. Open on the table. A single sentence underlined in red ink that wasn't mine. You don't want to end up like them. I sat down slowly. Someone had been here. Again. I tried to think rationally. Maybe I'd left the door unlocked. Maybe the smell was leftover from cleaning. But the handwriting, no, that wasn't mine. And the ink was still fresh. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the chair by the window, watching the street, waiting for the car to come back. But it didn't. Not that night. At sunrise, I made another decision. If they wanted silence, they'd get the opposite. I called a journalist, an old contact from years ago, when my husband's death had made a small notice in the paper. I told her I had something she needed to hear. She sounded skeptical at first, but when I mentioned Horizon, she went quiet. Then she said, I'll come by tomorrow morning. After I hung up, I felt something I hadn't in a long time, hope, faint but real. Maybe telling the truth was enough. Maybe I could finally end this. That night, I packed everything into a box, the letters, the photographs, the copies of Richard's notes. I left it on the table, next to the empty chair. When morning came, I made tea and waited. But she never arrived. By noon, I called her number. No answer. 2, I called again. This time, the line was dead. That's when I heard it. A car door closing outside. Slow. Deliberate. I went to the window. The black car. Only this time, it didn't stop across the street. It stopped right in front of my house. The engine went off. 2 people got out, both wearing dark coats. They didn't move right away. Just stood there staring at my door. And for the first time since this began, I realized something. They weren't watching me anymore. They were waiting for me. They stood there for maybe a minute. Just 2 dark figures under the streetlight. The air thick with silence. One taller, one shorter. No movement. No words. Only the steady hum of the car cooling down. I watched from behind the curtain, my pulse echoing in my ears. They knew I was inside. They wanted me to see them. I told myself I had 2 options, hide or finish what I started. So I walked to the table, picked up the box of papers and opened the door. The air outside was sharp, biting. They both turned when they heard the creak. One of them, the taller one, spoke first. "Mrs. Leland, we just want to talk." I laughed. My voice sounded thin, brittle. "That's what you told the Hendersons, isn't it?" Neither of them answered. The shorter one shifted slightly, like he was ready to move. I tightened my grip on the box. "I know everything," I said. "Horizon, the experiments, the cover-ups, the baby. You erased them, but I saw it all." The tall man sighed, like someone tired of explaining the same lie. "Those files shouldn't exist. You're in danger keeping them." "In danger from who?" I asked. "From the people cleaning up what's left?" He didn't deny it. I took a step forward, enough to see their faces under the streetlight. The woman, because the shorter one was a woman, had the same sharp eyes I'd seen weeks ago. The one who'd taken the box from the Hendersons' house. The one who'd smiled at me. She smiled again now, faintly. "You should have stayed quiet, Ruth. It's better for everyone." I could feel my heart pounding, but I didn't step back. Instead, I lifted the box, opened it slowly. Papers rustled in the wind, reports, letters, photos. Evidence of everything they tried to bury. "You want these," I said. "Then you'll have to take them." The man's expression hardened. "Don't make this difficult." But I was already walking down the steps. "I'm an old woman," I said quietly. "I don't have much left to lose. But I can still tell the truth." The woman moved first. Not fast, but deliberate. I could see a glint in her hand. Not a weapon, but a phone. She raised it, spoke into it. "She's making a scene. We need a car." That was my moment. I turned and walked down the street, clutching the box tight against my chest. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to keep moving. The night was cold, the pavement slick with rain. Behind me, I could hear footsteps. Not running, just following. By the time I reached the corner, I saw the old church. Its lights were off, but I knew the back door was always unlocked. Father Matthew had told me years ago, "In case you ever need a place to breathe." I pushed the door open and slipped inside. The smell of wax and dust filled the air. The silence felt sacred, almost fragile. I set the box on a pew and sat down. For the first time in weeks, I let my body go still. The tremors in my hands, the ache in my chest, all of it caught up at once. I thought of Richard, of the nights he couldn't sleep, pacing that study I used to resent, of how he must have known what was coming. Maybe he tried to stop it, maybe he couldn't. And maybe I was finishing what he couldn't. I heard a car outside, doors closing, footsteps again, closer this time. I took a deep breath and reached into the box, pulled out the oldest folder, the one with Richard's handwriting on the cover. "Observation terminated," it said. "Specimen relocated to unregistered address, 214 Maple Street." My address. I froze. The realization hit like ice down my spine. The crying I'd heard that night, the one that had stopped so suddenly, it hadn't come from the Hendersons' house. It had come from mine. Before I could think, the church door opened. Light spilled in. 2 silhouettes. The woman stepped forward, voice steady. "Ruth, please. You don't understand what you've uncovered." I stood. Maybe it was the years pressing on my bones, or maybe it was clarity, but I wasn't afraid anymore. You're right, I said. I don't understand. Not all of it. But I understand enough. The man moved closer. He looked at the box on the pew. Give it to us and we'll leave you alone. I shook my head. You already took everything from me. My husband. My peace. My sleep. You don't get this too. The woman sighed. Then you're leaving us no choice. She stepped closer, slow, cautious. And I did the only thing left to do. I reached for the candle beside me and tipped it over. The wax spilled across the pew, catching the corner of a folder. Paper blackened, curled. Smoke filled the air instantly. The woman shouted, lunging forward. But I was faster than I'd been in years. I grabbed the box, dragged it toward the flames. The reports, the photos, the notes, all of it. I threw it in. The fire caught quickly. It wasn't big, but it was enough. The heat stung my face, the smoke burned my throat. I didn't care. You can't hide it forever, she shouted. But I just looked at her and said, then start again. Without me. The man pulled her back as the flames spread. They left. I heard the door slam behind them. By the time the fire trucks arrived, the pews were black, the air thick with ash. I was sitting in the front row, staring at what was left. A few scraps of paper had survived. One of them fluttered near my shoe. Picked it up. It was part of a form. The last visible line read, Maternal Observer, Ruth Leland. I stared at it for a long time. Maternal Observer. I wasn't just a neighbor. I was part of the project. My watching, my notes, my daily journals, it had all been part of their data once. Maybe Richard had never told me because he knew I'd never forgive him. When the firefighters asked what happened, I told them the truth. That I'd knocked over a candle by accident. That I was fine. And that I didn't need to go to the hospital. I sat on the curb for hours after they left, watching the smoke fade into the dawn. The sun came up pale and cold. The black car was gone. The street was quiet again. I should have felt relief. But I didn't, because I knew what that paper meant. The data wasn't gone. It never is. Just moves. And somewhere out there, someone else is watching through their window right now, thinking it's harmless curiosity. Not realizing they're part of the story too. I've told you everything I know. Every sound, every shadow, every lie. I don't know if I did the right thing burning it all. Maybe I destroyed evidence. Maybe I saved lives. I'll never know. But tell me, what would you have done in my place? Did I do the right thing?